Hello everyone, it's Jeff Rich here from the Burning Archive. Welcome to another live stream. This stream is about the Ukraine Endgame. It was announced last week, or in the last few days even, that Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump will be meeting in Alaska, no less, Anchorage, Alaska, it seems, to discuss a possible negotiation of some kind of peace process with Ukraine or over the conflict in Ukraine. Is it a trap? Is it a trick, a deception? Is it a genuine process to move towards some kind of some kind of treaty? That is a question that a lot of people are debating. And in this live, I want to give you a bit of an update on some of the information that's come through in the last couple of days about this summit, which, of course, may yet not occur, though it's certainly looking like it will occur, and what its significance is, and maybe what some of the key issues that may be negotiated for at least a starting point for some kind of peace negotiation. If you haven't been here before, my name is Jeff Rich, and I also write a Substack at jeffrich.substack.com. I write weekly posts that give you book recommendations and also deep dives into, how to see this world that's a rapidly changing world more clearly with some quality history. I'm doing an India World History Tour at the moment. Later in the year, I will be doing a deep dive into Russia and Europe, and already this year I've also looked at the USA and China. So the five great powers, the five civilization states, if I can use that word of the modern world. So welcome everyone joining me live, and also welcome anyone joining me on the replay. I do want to keep this stream relatively shorter than some of my streams today, and really just focusing on this big issue to do with the Ukraine Endgame, the Atlantic Summit. Now, let me make some framing comments, I guess, about this event. So you can sort of make sense of the news. There's a lot of wild reporting and speculation about it at the moment, and indeed there is, within, I guess, the YouTube commentary world, notably from Brian Beletic, who's a highly esteemed analyst of international affairs at the New Atlas, some concern, fear, alarm that this may indeed be a trap, a deception, another case of duplicitous American diplomacy, such as occurred with Iran, such has occurred with previous negotiations, for example, the Minsk agreement in Ukraine. And even that there may be some risks to the personal security of maybe Donald Trump, but also more definitively Vladimir Putin when he travels to American soil for the discussion. And Brian was quite alarmist about it, and also, really took a view that perhaps there should be no real negotiations. And there's actually been a very good piece in Russia Today, which I'll just quickly share with you all. Here, let me see, what do we do? No, like this. Here's why all the critics of Alaska Summit are wrong. Evading diplomacy is a Western folly that Russia has no reason to imitate, by Tariq Cyril Amar. You might notice Tariq Cyril Amar giving a regular commentary at Syriana Analysis, a weekly live stream there. and he is absolutely a great commentator. And it's a really excellent analysis, so do check it out and have a read. And I guess his comment is basically, maybe Brian has been unduly alarmist. Will America, even rogue agents in America, really risk such an extraordinary international incident that would provoke a, potentially catastrophic retaliatory strike for who knows what reason, really, to finally get their revenge on Vladimir Putin. And he says, well, one should actually, however flawed the nature of the government, as the United States is certainly flawed, still try to engage with realistic diplomacy. So I guess the question is really, what is realistic diplomacy for this Alaska summit? And it's a question I've been reflecting on over the last few days, because it initially did surprise me that this summit should be announced, that it should be on American soil, that it should be so soon, given most of the noises coming from the Russian government were not really very pro summit event without a real more negotiated settlement. I suspect the speed with which it's been arranged has been organised, has been partly because of the rapid deterioration in the Ukrainian and NATO forces' position in Ukraine over the last few weeks. There's been a rapid deterioration in the military situation, which I won't go into in too much depth, but it's been widely commented on around the internet. There's been a deterioration in the social situation and the economic situation in Ukraine, serious concerns about currency problems and, viability of the government, that sort of thing. And with the protests and internal struggles for power, serious questions about political order there may not actually be a whole lot more time before there is a really orderly situation there, until the capability of a Ukrainian government to sort of keep order in this situation, to keep order over its military, continues to hold. And of course its military position is getting worse. As its military position gets worse, a military government loses power and authority as well, not just over its own soldiers, but also with its international partners and with its, the members of its society. So things are looking pretty rough in Ukraine right now. And I think that's contributed to the speed with which this is happening. And it relates to my broader analysis, I guess, of what all the kind of stage of the peace negotiation process, all the parties of this war, all the 5 parties of this war in my analysis, which is the United States, Russia, the 2 meeting in Alaska, Ukraine, where the actual war is being fought, the European Union and Britain. And I do distinguish between those two, because Britain is not part of the European Union. It has a different set of executive interests and processes going on. I can see Peter Frohine saying, I just pray the US is not setting a trap for President Putin. That would be a big mistake. Absolutely. I think we're all feeling that. There has been a report in the last 24 hours from the Russian Ministry of Defense that I guess you'd call it a false flag attack, a provocation attack, has been organised or been arranged by the Ukrainian and NATO, maybe British forces, with journalists flown to a certain area and reports of potential attacks on Ukrainian attacks on Ukrainian hospitals and that sort of thing, which would then be blamed on Russia and used as a pretext to cancel the talks. I don't know whether such a thing is true. Certainly, there has been a pattern of such behaviour in the past, of such provocation. So it may well be true. If that were to happen, I do wonder, how it is that the Russian Ministry of Defense has this time been able to flush out reporting of it so early. Perhaps even the Americans shared some intelligence with them, which might be a sign that they're trying to smoke out the MI6 and Ukrainian SBU operatives who might be scheming such a thing, which might be a sign of the bona fides, at least at some level, of the United States in this in this negotiation process. So again, let me just return to my main point, which is we're at a certain stage of the process. It's a very early tentative stage of the process of negotiating, not so much a peace, so much as the termination of the war with all 5 of these parties. And all 5 parties have different objectives that they're seeking to achieve with the termination of the war. None of them really want to continue the war. They want to continue the war until they've achieved their objectives. They will only end the war when they've achieved their objectives. And it's the differences between particularly the 4 parties who are notionally allied, but, have quite conflicting and different views and interests and perspectives and strategies and capabilities. Ukraine, USA, Europe, and Britain. It's particularly the differences between them that are making this an extremely complex matter. So it makes sense to me that Russia and the US meet initially, but the US at this point, I think, can really only can try to persuade, try to coerce its partners into a certain course of action, but it can't make that decision for them. But all of them at this point are interested in it. War termination at some level. It's just what are the conditions for that? And I think in a way that also puts some sort of framework on what may or may not be discussed at this Alaska summit. I think if there is something agreed to, it's going to be a relatively small tentative step that if you like, is the initial conditions of some kind of ceasefire that will enable more substantial negotiations of the deep and major issues involved, collective security in Europe, NATO, the form of the Ukrainian state, the territory of the Ukrainian state, the security guarantees for Russia, the restitution of some kind of trust in international diplomacy from the European and North American powers and Russia over the next period of time. There is a hell of a lot of things to discuss. There's no way this leaders' meeting is really going to do anything, I think, particularly much more than an initial start to the process. And I actually checked back on my videos reporting on the February or March, I can't quite remember the exact date, but it was 4 or 5 months ago, meeting between Sergei Lavrov and Marco Rubio in Riyadh in Saudi Arabia, which was, I guess, the first breakthrough meeting really between Russia and the United States on this path towards peace. I checked on that video earlier today, and what I was saying then was a lot of people were getting very excited, a lot of saying, this is proof Trump, wants an enduring relationship with Russia, a new great power negotiation, and halfway to peace, or that sort of thing. And I was really saying at that time that it was it was sort of baby steps and confidence building measures. And there were really only sort of three broad things that were agreed to at that meeting back in March. And maybe the template of that meeting might be something of it might be similar to what we might see come out of this Alaska meeting, which and those three things that came out were that first, that there was some sort of baby steps in normalization of diplomatic relations between Moscow and Washington, like appointing ambassadors to each other's countries, to properly staffed diplomatic offices, establish proper diplomatic protocols and communications. Talking about grand bargains is all very well, but if you don't even have an appointed ambassador in the capital of the other country, then, there's not really the personnel, the leadership, the structure, the relationships, the depth of understanding that would underpin that peace negotiation. And then the second big thing was to, set up some working groups to define a pathway for resolution of the Ukraine conflict. Now, we haven't heard a lot about either of those first two steps since February, March. I think there's been a very slow progress on the normalisation of diplomatic relations, and it has been set back by some of the American president's rhetoric, by some of the American and Ukrainian and European and British actions, including, of course, Operation Spiderweb and the deceptive sneak attack while negotiations were happening on Iran in a couple of months ago. So there's not been all that much progress on those baby steps of diplomatic confidence building, nor has there been a lot of reporting of whether these officials, working groups have developed a process or a pathway or a sort of an agreed, agenda or model for progressing negotiations on the peace. But almost certainly this is also something that doesn't really, is not really advanced terribly much by, truth, social media posts or, leaked reports to the Washington Post. This kind of serious diplomacy, is generally kept private and, is sort of pretty boring in many ways. It's actually dealing with the real issues rather than the media spin on the real issues. It's not always of terribly much interest to journalists whose attention span is not long enough and whose depth of understanding is not deep enough. So I suspect there has been some work on that, and one thing that points to that might be that there was a phone call in the last day or two between Sergei Lavrov and Marco Rubio to discuss preparations for the summit. And again, not really a whole lot said about what they said, but I suspect the fact that the foreign ministers are talking is a significant, indicator that there may be some kind of initial agreement to some kind of process. And the third thing, of course, that was talked about back in Riyadh was, economic partnerships between Russia and Ukraine. There has similarly not been a whole lot of action on that. in recent times, and a bit of pretty wild and woolly and erratic decision making on economic policy from President Trump and his entourage. But there has also been some speculation in advance of the Alaska summit that there might be some kind of announcement about joint investments in the Arctic, with significant resources and other sort of investment opportunities. And I suspect that may well be true, although, such investment deals might well be the kind of New York real estate deals that Donald Trump and Steve Witkoff are quite comfortable with, where there's a lot of talk and maybe not a whole lot of real action, at least not yet. But it would also give a sense of achievement and significance to a summit, which in other respects is a relatively modest set of achievements. Now, the big thing that everyone is talking about is these land swaps between Russia and Ukraine. It's a term that Donald Trump used in a press conference, probably a fairly loosely interpreted term, but it is a term which people have been talking about, and there's a lot of discussion and rumours and speculation about what it may be. Whether this is well informed, whether this is simply supposition, I don't know. But I did see on one of the OS-int channels earlier today, I think this is from a X account, that if you just give me 1 sec, I just need a little bit of a liquid in my mouth. This is talking about, this map is talking about four potential scenarios for land swaps. Now, I would interpret land swaps as not agreements. Let me just pop back here. I would interpret land swaps as not agreements on territory and giving up territory. I would interpret land swaps as troop withdrawals from current zones that are disputed while negotiations proceed. This is effectively something that was said by Vladimir Putin in June last year, when he set out a set of conditions for negotiation, which included, Ukrainian withdrawal from the 4 oblasts that have been constitutionally absorbed into Russia. Whether the West agrees with that or not, that is a legal fact. There are Russian governors and Russian passports and a whole set of administrative systems in place in these areas. They've been constitutionally established. But I think only in one of these oblasts or regions, provinces, does Russia control the entire territory. And what Vladimir Putin said was, as a condition of a ceasefire, Ukraine would have to withdraw all of its troops from these 4 oblasts, from Russian territory. And of course, that was further complicated when Ukraine invaded other Russian territory in Kursk later in the year, or around about the same time. So let me just show you these 4 options, which hopefully you can see reasonably clearly. It might be a little bit of a struggle if you're watching this on a phone, but I do think that it is a good way of thinking about it. So there are 4 regions. Lugansk, which is, they come down a diagonal on the east of Ukraine, Luhansk, at the top, Donetsk, second top, Zaporozhye, third, Kherson, fourth. And some people describe Crimea, at least in the Ukrainian perspective, as a fifth region that might be discussed. I've heard some, British geopolitics commentators say, well, the land swap will be for Crimea. And, I don't think any realistic chance of that. And if you look at the top left one, it shows you the black line is the current front line, the current line of contact. So you can see that Lugansk is completely controlled by Russia. Donetsk is mostly controlled, but there's some big fortified cities, particularly Slavyansk and Kramatorsk, which are not controlled. Zaporozhye, again, mostly controlled, but the core city of Zaporozhye is not, although the Zaporozhye nuclear power plant is controlled by Russia. And finally, Kherson is a bit similar. Most of the region is controlled, but not the city, which is on the Dnieper River. And so there are 4 potential proposals for doing this swap. One, the top left one, is that Russia would gain, that would be as Vladimir Putin proposed last year, and that is Ukrainian troops totally withdraw from those areas, and that is the one where they talk about Russia gaining those 4 regions. So the Ukrainian troops would retreat, behind the border, and then there would then be a ceasefire. The second one is that that would only happen that Ukraine would only withdraw completely from Donetsk and Lugansk regions, which were the initial core areas in dispute, and that there would be the current line of contact between Zaporozhye and Kherson. The third one would be, I think the third one is I think the first one, the first option on the far left is, it looks like Ukraine keeps Kherson on the coast there. And then the option 3 is where, Ukraine would completely withdraw from Kherson. And then the European preference is that it would be just frozen on the current line of contact. It would be basically a static situation. So these are the 4 land proposals, if you like, land swap proposals that people are talking about. And I think this may well be something that is discussed at the summit. There may well be some sort of in principle agreement to at least, I think, discuss these proposals with the other parties, i.e. Ukraine, and with Europe and with Britain. And indeed, I believe there is scheduled at 4 p.m. European time, which I guess is about 5 to 6, 7, 8 hours from now. There's going to be a phone call meeting between Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and the European and Ukrainian leaders, European, British and Ukrainian leaders, about the nature of the Alaska summit discussions. To be a fly on that wall. And, I guess no one really knows how that will go, although by the time people are perhaps watching the replay of this video, that will be known by now. So That, I think, is the nature of the territory land swaps. But again, to emphasise, I think what we're talking about here are troop withdrawals to enable a ceasefire, to then enable a negotiation process about the long-term status of those territories. And I think that also raises a really interesting issue, which has actually been discussed quite a bit in the Ukrainian media. Hang on, before I do that, I forgot one thing about this all. Now, this is I think it's the Ukraine map, the UA live map. I was having trouble sort of getting the zoom quite right, so I've just taken a screenshot of a fairly wide angle view of it, and you can see where all the little guns are. Little red circles of the guns, they're sort of frontline troops. And that's that sort of line of contact that we saw on the other map, which let me just show you that one now. You can see this line of contact. Now, let me just focus in particular on the black line. If you look at the black line there, you can see this a little bit more clearly than the other one. You can see the black line at the top of the area slightly extends into another oblast of Russia, of Ukraine, that is east of the Lugansk region, which is the Kyiv region, the region around the major city of Kyiv or Kharkov. And Russia actually has forces in that region as well. So it means there is also a question that Russia might offer the withdrawal of troops from the territories, the oblasts, which it has not constitutionally included in Russia, which in a sort of, regardless of the rights or wrongs of it, if you think about it as a negotiating position, sort of makes sense. Ukraine, withdraw your troops from the regions that we believe we've included in our country, those 4 oblasts that have been voted on and constitutionally included in Russia, and we'll withdraw from the regions which are still part of your country, which are both the Kharkiv region and the Sumy region. And I can see Neat Antelope saying any proposal which doesn't offer Ukraine security guarantees is worthless. And that is a good and interesting point. Probably the same thing for Russia as well. And this whole peace process ultimately needs to get to a point where there's a collective security agreement really for Europe, including Russia, part of Europe, that all parties can live with. But I think that sort of arrangement is probably, I'd say, a couple of years away yet. I think at this point, the bad faith between parties, not just between Russia and Ukraine, not just between Russia and the United States, but indeed between Ukraine and the United States, and between Ukraine and Britain and Europe, and Britain and Europe, and the tensions in these relationships mean the bigger issues that will ultimately need to be resolved will not be able to be resolved in the next couple of weeks or months. They'll need to be put into some kind of process that may well take a couple of years, but that can perhaps proceed in a way that is separated from, the worst of the fighting. So that's my comment on your thought there, Neat, as well. So the troop withdrawals, I think probably the most likely negotiated scenario is that last one that I talked about of Russia saying we'll take our troops out of your legal territory, you take your troops out of our legal territory. Let's have the argument about which territory is legally ours, away from this situation of immediate fighting, but let's just take people away from that action for now. Let's kind of restore order and safety within those regions that are clearly within our undisputed control, well, our sense of our own control, and then we will set up some sort of process. So any land swap, I think, is going to be really a troop withdrawal, a temporary troop withdrawal process with a whole lot of provisos and conditions, actions in case of breaches. And then there will be some kind of process for the sort of deeper negotiation process. Now, I can see Neat Antelope saying the Russian summer offensive in the Sumy Oblast has been a complete failure. Do you think that Ukraine will be in a more favourable negotiating position in the future? Now, that's interesting. I'm not really a military analyst. I can't really tell you what the deal is, and we will in terms of that military situation. But I do think Ukraine is in a really critical crisis situation in terms of its military situation, its economic situation, its social situation, and its political situation. You know, the major protests the other day, scandals about the government. There's a sense of breakdown going on there, which I think we'll come to in a bit. So I think part of the reason we're having this summit now is things are getting very, very bad in Ukraine, and they could actually get to a place where they're quite disorderly and unmanageable. Now, for Piskiliski, I hope I've done that right. For Piskiliski summit, what have the US to offer? Why take the risks? The risks are not insignificant. Absolutely. Really good question. Really, really good question. And I think this is part of Brian Beletic's skepticism and some others' skepticism. But I think in the end, I think Russia does need to end the war at some point and in some way. And I don't think it's really in Russia's interest for things to get entirely disorderly in Ukraine also. And ultimately, I think what the United States can offer is what it does control. The United States, with all the pretense of being a broker and all that sort of stuff, the United States is actually, a party of the war, a principal controller of the war, the principal supplier of weapons, of military intelligence, of strategy, of mercenaries and other kind of strategic intelligence, advice on major operations, and ultimately the people who installed the current, Ukrainian government. So I think, in a sense, what the US has to offer is it can say to Ukraine, we're going to stop military aid, we're going to withdraw intelligence, support. We're going to, stop flying the drones over the Black Sea. We're going to stop providing targeting information. We're going to stop providing repairs and technical support and guidance for the firing of the advanced weapons. And I think there is quite a bit of talk in Ukraine itself about that, which I'll get to in 1 second. Let me just answer a couple of these other questions. From Junior Plan, is Russia buying time and or are they taking a strategic sequencing approach due to other threats emerging, like in the Caucasus? Well, I think strategic sequencing is a bit of a planner's dream rather than an actual diplomat's reality. The diplomatic reality is, all this mess is all occurring at the same time. And from the United States point of view, it sure is not really happening to plan. The tariff war hasn't happened to plan. The relationship with India hasn't gone to plan. The war in Ukraine hasn't gone to plan. The trade negotiations with Japan and Europe, etc., have not gone to plan. The internal politics of the United States have not gone to plan. It is a mess. It's not a strategic sequence. So I think Russia needs to act and deal with the parties that it has. And it also must know that, these negotiations are going to take time and there's no certainty about them. And the only certain thing is that, the caravan will move on in Washington. The midterm elections will be on us within a year. The duration of any authority Donald Trump has to actually come to some serious negotiation is rapidly diminishing, especially if the situation in Ukraine is starting to implode as well. So that's my sense of things, Junior Plan. I think people are responding to rapidly changing events and rapid deteriorations in events. And I think one can sometimes exaggerate the extent to which people, there's, some sort of grand master plan behind it all. Okay, let me get on with a couple of the other points I kind of wanted to make in this discussion, and then come back to any more questions that people might have. So what does all this mean? As I say, I think what we're likely to see at the Alaska summit is some kind of troop withdrawal agreement or proposal that will then need to get clearance from Ukraine, from Europe, and from Britain. And those people are really all a little bit all over the place. Now, I wanted to share with everyone, I'll just take Junior Plan's question off the mark. I just wanted to share with everyone, not that one, this one, a article that's in strana.ua, which is, a Ukrainian newspaper, which is, you can see there just the automatic Google translation into English of strana.ua. I speak a little bit of Russian, but I do not speak a whole lot of Ukrainian, similar language. Animal Farm says Trump is just the latest oligarch puppet. Presidents come and go, but the policies remain the same. There is a lot of institutional inertia, but you have to deal with the party that you're negotiating with. You can't hope them to be something else. Whatever happens, the ultimate negotiation of this diplomatic negotiation of this war will be with the current US government and the current European Union government, British government and Ukrainian government. Although just exactly what that Ukrainian government is a little bit less clear, and that's really the issue raised in this article, which is titled "Riot or Peace? What awaits Ukraine if Zelensky agrees to withdraw troops from Donetsk Oblast?" And so the article really discusses exactly what we've just been talking about, which is this little paragraph here, which I'll just read for you. I'll just maybe make it a little bit bigger for you as well. Just give me a second. There we go. So there's a heated debate over the possible conditions for ending the war on the eve of the meeting between Trump and Putin. And it has important domestic political aspects for Ukraine. As Strana has already reported, based on numerous publications in Western media, territorial concessions by Kyiv may become the central part of the peace agreement project. Again, as I say, one needs to qualify this to say that it is really more of how would you put it? It's more of a process, setting up a process for deeper negotiations rather than a complete peace agreement or territorial concessions. It's troop withdrawals while there is deeper negotiations on territory. However, this is obviously a case where there is smoke without fire. There is no smoke without fire. Zelensky made it clear that Ukraine has been asked to give up some of the territories it currently controls, and he said that he will not do this. Europe supported him in this. And of course, in a sense, what we're talking about with troop withdrawals is he's not giving up territory. He's saying, I will pull the troops out for now. We'll stop firing at each other while we negotiate about who actually controls this territory. It's not until we come to an agreement over who, in the long term, legally controls the territory, that we are actually giving up the regions. According to media reports, in order for Putin to agree to a ceasefire, I'll just bring myself into the picture to make it more entertaining for you all. Ukraine is required to withdraw troops from the entire territory of the Donetsk and Lugansk regions while freezing the front line in the Kherson and Zaporizhzhia regions. So they're the four options that we were talking about earlier on. Again, troop withdrawals. The question is, is it the June last year conditions that Vladimir Putin said withdrawals from all four regions? Is it freezing at the front line? Is it withdrawal of Russian troops only from Sumy and Kyiv Oblast? At the same time, according to a number of data, Russia in this case will leave the captured parts of Sumy and Kyiv regions. That is, there will be some kind of territory exchange, land swap, which Trump also spoke about. However, the exchange is extremely unfavourable to Ukraine, both in terms of size and the significance of the territories being exchanged. It is a kind of de facto admission that they have lost. And that is why, of course, Zelensky and the Europeans are against such an exchange. And they are therefore trying to convince Trump to support the demands for the withdrawal of Ukrainian troops from Donbass, but to return to the previous idea of a ceasefire along the front line. Now, I suspect all of this, there was a couple of weeks ago discussion of a new Russian concept. I suspect this is the new Russian concept, and it may well, I think, have been Russia withdraws from the Ukrainian territories, Ukraine withdraws from the Russian territories, and there's been various negotiations about it ever since. And then we say, this is a really key paragraph, I think. But if this does not work out, then Kyiv will face two options. The first is to refuse, risking losing any assistance from Washington and possibly even facing coercive measures from Trump. The second is to agree. But there are also many risks here. Experts are of the opinion that this will be Zelensky's political suicide, will cause protests and riots, followed by the removal of the current president from power at the elections or even without them. Moreover, as the recent cardboard Maidan, the recent protests featuring cardboard, which I discussed on previous videos, showed Bankova is weak in withstanding the blows of the street. So this is the key thing. And what people are saying is that again, it's the threat to Kiev to say, agree, or we will pull out our intelligence sharing, our weapons, our military aid, our financial aid, our intelligence aid, our, who knows what level of cooperation that there is really involved there. And it will that will basically leave Ukraine in an extremely vulnerable position, which will only weaken them militarily and will then probably contribute further to their political problems. But one does also wonder whether, the part of the, medium-term negotiation process has got to be the creation of a orderly, legitimate, acceptable Ukrainian government, acceptable to all those people protesting on the streets of Ukraine, to the various external partners of Ukraine, and also to the current sort of power elite within Ukraine. So I do wonder whether what we'll also see, perhaps not so much in the public provisions of any agreement on the summit, but some kind of process to move towards elections, some sort of different sort of government in Ukraine that would lead to a negotiable partner for Russia and the European Union and the USA over the next period of time, because it looks to me increasingly that the current government in Kiev is simply not able to hold things together. Now, I'm going to be talking about these issues a little bit more later tonight on Jamal Thomas's show, the Jamal Thomas Morning Show. It's a little bit after 9:15 p.m. Australian time, so in about a little over 4 hours. So I won't go into too much more detail about that, but do check me out there, either live or on the replay. And let me just return for the last few minutes of this stream. I want to finish up within the hour, if that's okay with everyone, to a couple of questions that people have asked here, and I will just go back to where I think we were last at, which is Junior Plan. So Backstreet's Back All Right says, if Russia ends the war now, they'll just have an army they can't use for anything. Well, I don't know. I think the other issue for Russia, they can end the war, they can win on the battleground, but they also, as does Europe, have an enormous problem of what to do with the government, the society and the economy of Ukraine on their doorstep. They'll still have to pay for it all the same. They just won't be able to use it. Animal Farm says, Trump is just the latest oligarch puppet. I think I might have read this one before. Presidents come and go, but the policies remain the same. Yes and no. I think the I think I think Brian Beletic, some of those people do tend to overstate the stability of foreign policy ideas and networks and institutions. There is certainly some continuity, but things do change, and there's a lot of a lot of devil in the detail, a lot of nuance in the different factions as to who's got control. And for sorry about this. For Pskilski, I'm doing my best, and I can read Cyrillic, as you can tell, but I'm just having a little bit of trouble getting all those syllables quite right, all those consonants quite right. If you push too far, Russia have weapons you can't stop, and there will be no warning. And I think this is true. And frankly, I think the Americans understand that too. And I think that's why we're moving towards a peace quite quickly, because I think the one thing Donald Trump does not want is a total collapse, a Kabul 2.0 in Ukraine under his watch. He will, I doubt he'll really survive such an action. The Istanbul Communique of 2022 was a softer agreement for Ukraine. Absolutely. There was a really fantastic discussion by Jacques Beau, the Swiss colonel, intelligence colonel, on Glenn Deason's podcast earlier today, which I highly recommend everyone watch. And he's shown maps on discussions and interviews he's had before of, what would have happened if certain agreements had been reached in 2013 and 2014 and 2016 and 2017 and 2018 and 2019, 2020, 2022, 2023. It's only got worse for Ukraine. Obviously there are a few people sympathetic to Ukraine on the live stream at the moment, but I just think, what the American, European, and other Western powers, including my country of Australia, have done in dragging Ukraine into this sort of war for their own glory and their own imperial ambition is utterly immoral and deeply, deeply tragic. What have we got here? Ashley Albanese, no relation to the Prime Minister, no doubt. The drawing out of 3 Ukrainian armies in 2022-23 showed great military and economic political skill. How is that echoed in the present chaos? Yeah, look, I'm not too au fait with the military stuff. I have noticed there's a lot of internal fighting, I guess, within the different units in Ukraine about what's going on. A lot of discussion about the Azov forces, or renamed Azov forces, going to the front line and being used as elite forces, and them being really happy the fact that they're backed up by amateur conscripts who don't know what they're doing. So it really is sort of falling down in a general coordination sense there in Ukraine. Animal Farm says strategic sequencing is Washington policy. What about the papers from the Washington think tank, the Marathon Initiative? Yeah, look, yeah, absolutely. I agree. They have these plans. They articulate these plans. Elbridge Colby is trying to engineer, strategic sequencing between, to get out of Europe and to focus on China. God knows why. But what I doubt is whether the plans really exist outside of these heads, outside of paper, whether they can actually be implemented in such a neat way in reality. And I think that's partly what they're sort of discovering. Jack says, do you like Alabama? I've never been to Alabama, so I'm not quite sure what you mean. Neat Antelope says, I hate the term territorial exchange in this context. I agree. I think it is a misleading term. I think it's giving off the wrong messages. As I said, I think what we're talking about is troop withdrawals to enable negotiations without fire over the longer-term resolution of who controls what territory. And, all those arguments to be traversed. I can't see, though, in any universe, Ukraine getting the 4 oblasts back, I'm afraid. In fact, I think it's quite likely that there'll be some sort of vote process for other oblasts in Ukraine to sort of have the opportunity to join the Russian Federation. We've got Orbán deals another blow to Western unity, refusing to sign the EU statement back in Ukraine and outright declaring Russia has won this war. Indeed, Trump has said to him that, China beats you on trade and Russia beats you on war. So, again, this is part of my argument about the strategic sequencing. Orbán is, with blunt influence, stating to Trump that, you might think you're sort of getting out of Russia in order to fight China, but you're losing on both. So you're actually not in control of the situation. Robert Fico has accused the West of using Ukraine in a failed attempt to weaken Russia, asserting that Ukraine will pay dearly while its NATO dream is dead. He is spot on. And I might add that I read a recent report that the Czech Republic, former other part of Czechoslovakia, is having elections coming up in early October, and the expectation is that the new government in the Czech Republic, Czechia, will be sympathetic with Robert Fico's point of view, so that you'll have Czech, the Slovak, and the Hungarian governments all, stating this sort of position on Ukraine, which is really quite a significant rebalancing of effort there in Eastern Europe. Putin will not tolerate any hostile forces in Ukraine that threatens the people of the Russian Federation. Totally agree. Is this not an informal surrender by NATO? Yes, I think it is an informal surrender. And I think this is where the optics, I guess, will come into play, because, and also why, ultimately it is perhaps a less humiliating end to the war for NATO than, I guess, Russia marching all the way into Kyiv, or, blowing up, various NATO bases in Eastern and Southeastern Europe. I think Russia's task is to win the war with, if I can put it in sort of emotional terms, win the war with grace and dignity, rather than humiliate, rub America and Europe's face in the dirt. That is, if you like, the great mistake that America made after the Cold War. So I think that is the case, and that is why people are struggling to deal with it. And that is why I wouldn't be surprised if there are some big announcements about big investments in the future for the Arctic between the US and Russia, to sort of take away, like a big puff of smoke as a magician disappears the object in the magic show in Alaska. I question what assurances Trump can give Putin that his successor won't renege on, as Trump himself reneged on the Iran nuclear deal. Will Putin be satisfied with a deal that has a 3-year lifespan? That is a totally good question. And I think, in a way, I think it's going to be framed in a baby steps kind of thing. Like, okay, we'll do a ceasefire, we'll withdraw from the territories, but first, you have to stop the weapons, stop the intelligence services, all that sort of stuff. And when we have proof that you've done that, we will do this sort of action. I think we're in that sort of territory of, trust but verify, or check, agree but verify negotiations, rather than any sort of like, this is peace for the next 3 years type agreement. Gabriel Rio, let me see, has said I should say, well, I just have a quick drink of water here, that everyone should go to my Substack at jeffrich.substack.com and become a paid subscriber if you like. I give you deep dives, slow reads, excellent weekly history book recommendations, looking at India at the moment. We'll look at Europe and Russia later in this year. And that's a great way to support the podcast or the channel and my work. You can, of course, contribute here through a super chat or thanks. And you can also become a paid subscriber at jeffrich.substack.com. One does have to, pay the mortgage, keep the home fires burning and all that sort of stuff. I hope you don't mind that I give myself that little plug, and I'd be deeply appreciative of any support that people can offer me. Gabriel Rio, the elite formations, or idiotically motivated, are known for PR stunts and as blocking units. In other words, to stop the conscripts from retreat. Yeah, that's right. Interestingly, I did read that Zelensky has made a major announcement in the last couple of days that 20 young men up to the age of 22 will be allowed to leave the country. Many thanks, Crees. Really appreciate it. It's really fantastic of you to share that. Many thanks, Crees. Keep up the good work. Peace, man. So thank you very much, Crees. Blocking units. Oh, that's what I was saying. The Zelensky has agreed to allow 22-year-olds, up to 22-year-olds, to leave the country. Of course, at the moment, it's open air prison in Ukraine. People are stopped at the border, all this sort of stuff. They're sort of chased down with drones. There's really disturbing footage of all this kind of thing. I think it's seen as significant that Zelensky has done this, and perhaps a sign that they may be moving towards some sort of election, some sort of end to the war from a Ukrainian front. Since after all, in a way, it's sort of like a soft sort of, get out now, folks, because, it's all coming to an end. This is your early release notice. We've got who is going to police a ceasefire. Absolutely. And I think there's going to be a whole lot of stuff that will need to be negotiated in detail with this peace process. So I think the Alaska thing will be a first step, and it may all break down as well. But let's hope it does lead to something. And as you say here, it is going to take a generation. And then I see Neat Antelope saying, thank you for the stream. I wish you continued growth and success on your social media ventures. It is great how you cover such a wide range of regions and periods on the channel. Thank you, Neat. And I also see Neat saying, I also enjoyed the film Farewell My Concubine, which I watched thanks to your recommendation. I'm so glad you did watch it. It is a fabulous film. I hope you watched it in 4K, or I hope you were able to get the sort of remastered edition that's in 4K. I haven't yet been able to see that. And unfortunately, the sort of kind of pirated copies that used to be of the old version that used to be on YouTube are sort of a bit scarce to get now that the 4K version is out. But I'm really, really pleased that you got to see it. It is It really is a great film. Everyone should watch this. It's really the story of 20th century, since 1920 or so, Chinese history, particularly through the Cultural Revolution, for an absolutely brilliant story. So do check it out. Farewell, My Concubine. And one last comment I can see here is that NATO are involved. Absolutely, NATO are involved. But again, I like to break, and in my reporting on this war, my discussion, commentary on this war, not reporting on this war, I've always described it as the NATO-Russia-Ukraine war, or NATO-Ukraine-Russia war, and but one of the complexities is the divisions between the different NATO parties. Elena says, I watched that movie years ago in Greece, and it was so long, I was standing in the end. Brilliant movie, of course. Every time I watch it, I sort of tear up, I got to say. It's an astonishing film. Cold War warriors, be on the lookout for a false flag. Yes, and I think I mentioned earlier in the stream that the Russian Ministry of Defense has reported a plan, let's say, for a false flag. Again, it's a report. I don't know if it's true, but definitely concerning, and there's certainly a pattern of past behaviour along those fronts, particularly during this Russia-Ukraine war, and I just hope that doesn't happen. And I think it's interesting, though, that that report did come out. It was widely reported in RT. I wonder if it was a warning from the Americans to do not do this, and whether that warning is going to be reinforced in this phone call between the Americans, Ukrainians, Europeans, and British that's going on this evening. Even fools sometimes have a little bit of sense. And Gabrielle Rio says, interesting, I didn't know the prison gates have been partially opened. Might be a way to avoid dissidents from voting or to deprive as much population from the lost territories. Absolutely, yeah. And it's something that's only just happened in the last couple of days as well, together with announcements around students and things like that, which may well be also about garnering political support, both in response to the protests and also in expectation of elections. Now, if the US sort of says, yeah, we'll have elections in 4 weeks, and de facto all that happens is Zelensky comes up and talks about things, and is the only real candidate, that's not really proper elections. Now, Jinho Choi, Chen Kage, the director of Farewell, My Concubine, is a dear friend. Thank you, Dr. Jeff. Well, please, Jinho Choi, please say thank you from me to Chen Kage for his absolutely gorgeous film. And for people who don't know, I guess there's a character within the film who, in a way, represents Chen Kage himself through the film. It really is one of the great films. So thanks for letting me know that, Jinhoi. I'm really, really delighted about that. And Elena says, I am in Cyprus, by the way, Colonial Outcasts recently did a podcast that was talking about how Israel has now said they want to liberate the island from the Turks. Do you know anything about this? I don't know. I know about the Turkish-Greek war, the division of Cyprus. Britain, the British Empire still holds to what they call sovereign territories on Thanks, Jinho. That's really awesome. Sovereign territories on Cyprus. I've heard that there have been a lot of Israeli refugees is not quite the right word, but people leaving Israel to go to a more secure place during the sort of Iran conflict, etc., who've gone to Cyprus. But I haven't heard anything about that. But I will check out that Colonial Outcasts podcast and see what else I can find out. It's been a great stream, folks. Thanks to everyone who's joined me. Thanks for Chris for being kind enough to make a donation to me. Looks like you're in Hong Kong there. And I hope that is of interest to you. Just a couple of plugs. I am on the Jamal Thomas show later tonight, so do check that out. And Jamal always releases the little interview segments as separate videos later, so you'll be able to see that tomorrow sometime. And I did an extensive interview about these issues as well as other issues with Bogan and the Bogan Intelligentsia YouTube channel. Joel Jenkins from the Bogan Intelligentsia YouTube channel, a fellow Australian, a fellow Melburnian, and that will be coming out in the next day or two as well. And I also have a great interview coming up in the next week or so with a historian of the diplomacy of the 1930s from the perspective of the Soviet Union, which I think will be of a lot of interest and has some uncanny parallels with what's been going on a little bit later in more recent years. So thanks everyone for joining me this Wednesday afternoon Australian time, and hope it's been an informative and valuable discussion for you. Do head over to jeffrich.substack.com. Do like the stream, share with your friends, and do subscribe to the channel. And I will see you again real soon. Thanks now. Bye now.